superheroes don't always come wrapped in morning cheer. And that's what we're here to discuss today. Sometimes they bleed, curse, fall apart, and dive into places way too dark for kids. Over the years, a handful of animated shows have dared to go there, digging into gore, trauma, sex, and satire in ways that make you forget this stuff is just a cartoon. So if you ever thought animation was only for kids, this list is here to prove you wrong. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Spawn, 1997. This animated series premiered on HBO in 1997 and ran for 3 seasons, comprising 18 episodes until 1999. As the name suggests, this was indeed inspired by Todd McFarlane's comic and followed the journey of Al Simmons, a betrayed and killed government assassin. At the time, this series received quite a bit of critical acclaim, and even an Emmy Award. So why does it make the adult cut? Well, for starters, Al Simmons was not your average caped crusader. The series was moody, violent, and honestly kind of disturbing. The protagonist cut the worst Faustian bargain possible as he sold his soul to a demon to come back to life and see his wife again. But of course, a deal with a demon is never as it seems. So he instead gets turned into a hellish creature, Spawn. The show leaned too heavily into tragedy to be fit for kids. After all these shenanigans, Spawn came to realize that life had moved on without him. His daughter calls someone else her dad, and he just gets stuck with vengeance and whatever scraps of humanity he has left. It was not just the tragic backstory that made it unsuitable for kids. Even visually, the series was something that children needed to distance themselves from. Visually, everything was grim, jagged, and gothic. There were displays of unfiltered gore and graphic violence, along with strong language and profanity. The sound design and score, composed by Shirley Walker, with moody gothic tones, added another immersive layer to its bleak ambience. The show was too psychologically complex for kids, and when combined with sex scenes and nightmare-fueled imagery of hell, it rightfully earned the title of for mature adults only. It was unexpected for the audience as well, and fans on forums reminisce to this day about how they were kind of expecting the gore in adult language, but sex scenes were something completely unheard of during that time for animated shows. Other shows at the time might have flirted with darker themes, but Spawn dove headfirst into them and never came up for air. It was a story of identity, grief, and the cost of making a deal you can't take back. Hellboy Animated, 2006. When people hear an animated superhero movie, they often think light, kid-friendly stuff. That is not the case with Hellboy Animated. These two TV specials, Sword of Storms, 2006, and Blood and Iron, 2007, lean hard into horror, folklore, and moral ambiguity. Both were produced by Film Roman, best known for The Simpsons, with animation from Japan's Madhouse. So visually, they got that slightly anime-influenced shadow-heavy style. Mignola and Del Toro were hands-on in shaping the stories, which kept them consistent with the comics instead of watering things down. Sword of Storms sets Hellboy in a supernatural version of Japan. A professor becomes possessed by ancient spirits after unlocking a forbidden scroll, and Hellboy ends up trapped in a mythic dimension. Armed with a cursed sword, he has to navigate monsters pulled from Japanese folklore. Blood and Iron is where the series first finds its teeth. This one's a gothic ghost story that flashes back to Professor Bruttenholm's younger days battling Erzsébet Andrushko, a vampiress clearly modeled on Elizabeth Báthory. In the present, the BPRD investigates a mansion crawling with restless spirits, and Erzsébet rises again, this time with ties to Hecate, the goddess of witches. Neither film is for kids. The violence is stylized but still brutal, with blood rituals, corpses, and bodies crumbling to dust. The monsters are grotesque, not sanitized. Even the dialogue carries a weight that's more for teens and adults, touching on death, corruption, and the price of messing with forces you can't control. In Blood and Iron, Erzsébet literally bathes in the blood of her victims to stay young. That's straight out of real-life Báthory legend, and it's grim stuff. Hellboy's whole character arc is about fate versus free will. Can he escape becoming the beast of the apocalypse, or is he doomed no matter what? Which kid is grasping this theme? Our guess is not a single one. Even the tone and pacing are adult. These aren't fast, quippy, joke-heavy stories. They take their time, build atmosphere, letting silence and dread do the work. Kids might find that boring. There aren't really any R-rated levels of gore or profanity in Hellboy, unlike other picks of this list. But it doesn't take a genius to understand that it's meant for a mature audience.
Bow before your new king, land animals.
Super Mansion, 2015. Next in line is Super Mansion, which was one of those oddball stop-motion gems created by Matthew Senrick and Zeb Wells that took a comedic tone. This series starred Bryan Cranston, Tucker Gilmore, Heidi Gardner, Tom Root, Keegan-Michael Key, Yvette Nicole Brown, Jillian Bell, and Zeb Wells himself. It premiered on Sony Crackle in October 2015 and showcased a bunch of mismatched superheroes, each more quirky than the other. The basic premise was that this crazy bunch lived together in a big gothic mansion in Storm City. Yep, you guessed it right, this base was called the Super Mansion. But since we're on a list of superhero cartoons for adults, it's a given that this hero squad was nothing like what kids would enjoy. This bunch had run dry of their funding, the public had moved on from them, so they had to not only keep up with their superhero responsibilities to stay relevant, but also had to squabble with the pettiness of modern life. Oh, and before we forget to mention, all this under the watchful eye of the government. It was a dramedy, and the plot was one of a kind. Also, it was unapologetically and gleefully adult animated. It was an extremely sharp-witted satire with tons of innuendo. Being a dramedy, it definitely had comedy, but the jokes were nowhere near suitable for kids. It might not be as in-your-face R-rated as the other cartoons like Spawn, but it's definitely R-rated in spirit. The characters are flawed, relatable, and far from ideal. Titanium Rex desperately tries to mentor millennial heroes who mostly care about branding and chill vibes. It's like a superhero midlife crisis in a shoebox diorama. Harley Quinn, 2019. Moving on, we have Harley Quinn, which dropped in November 2019 on DC Universe, kicking off with its first episode titled Till Death Do Us Part. Harley Quinn herself doesn't play safe, and neither does this animated series dedicated to her. It is rated TVMA for a reason, so you can definitely expect profanity, gore, messed up relationships, and twisted humor. Warner Bros. Animation and DC Universe put this baby together, with Justin Halpern, Patrick Schumacher, and Dean Lorey running the show. And right from the start, they knew this was going to stick with the adult fans. It got such good buzz that when DC Universe folded, the series jumped over to HBO Max. The series had a great ensemble cast as well, with Kaylee Cuoco playing Harley and Lake Bell as Ivy. Then you've got Alan Tudyk pulling double duty as Joker and Clayface, Robert Funches playing King Shark, Tony Hale as Dr. Psycho, and many more. It starts with Harley finally breaking free from Joker's emotional chokehold and finding her way as a fresh face among villains. Somewhere down the line, she meets Poison Ivy, and this messy relationship eventually sparks something deeper. Well, at least deep enough that parents would want their kids miles away from it. As for the style of the series, it is aptly manic, just like Harley's personality, with bright, colorful animation, but with bones, blood, profanity, and jokes about existential dread. Some critics call it surprisingly emotional, while others call it violently delightful. Rotten Tomatoes gave Season 1 a 90+ approval rating, and by Season 2, it was sitting at 100%. Even The New Yorker praised its mix of chaos, social commentary, and heartfelt self-discovery. Underneath all the insane one-liners and bat swings, it tackles real stuff. Harley breaking free from an abusive relationship is a hard-hitting truth that many adults relate to. Also, Ivy isn't just there to be a sidekick. She's Harley's anchor, bestie, and eventually lover. In Season 2, they kiss. And it's canon, but again, not for kids. There's graphic gore, non-stop cussing, mature themes, hints at drug use and drinking, sexual innuendo, all served with an adult wink. Invincible, 2021. A 17-year-old idolizes his father, only to realize he might not be as heroic as he seems, and consequently falls into a deep pit of daddy issues. That's what Invincible, our next pick, is all about. It's a full-tilt TV MA-rated knock on the door of your psyche, and it hit Amazon Prime Video in March 2021 with major force. It was helmed by the creator of The Walking Dead, Robert Kirkman, along with co-developer Simon Ratchiopa, and produced by Skybound, Point Grey, Winsun Sky, and Amazon MGM Studios. The show premiered on March 25, 2021. Some folks got episodes starting March 26, with an 8-episode first season. What we actually got was one of the bloodiest, most emotionally brutal series in years. It's based on the comic by Robert Kirkman, Cory Walker, and Ryan Ottley, and right from the first episode, it sets a different tone. The story follows Mark Grayson, a teenager who seems normal enough until his powers finally kick in. His dad just happens to be Omni-Man, Earth's greatest hero, and Mark thinks he's about to follow in his father's footsteps. The twist? Omni-Man is hiding a secret so dark it redefines everything Mark knows about his family, trust, and heroism. If you've seen that infamous finale to episode 1, you know the subway scene, the team massacre. You understand why people were suddenly hooked. Production-wise, Amazon didn't cut corners. The series had Simon Ratchiopa as showrunner, with Kirkman heavily involved to make sure the adaptation stayed true while still expanding in new ways. Cory Walker even returned as lead character designer, which gave the show that faithful comic book on-screen look. What makes Invincible feel so grown up isn't just the gore, though to be fair, the gore is wild. It's the emotional weight, Mark's relationship with his dad, the betrayal, the impossible moral choices. It all plays out with the kind of raw intensity you don't usually see in animation. By the time Season 2 rolled out in 2023-2024, and Season 3 hit in 2025, Invincible had basically secured its place as Amazon's flagship adult animation.
You know, friend, it's hard to hold a gun when it's 500 degrees Fahrenheit.
The Boys presents Diabolical 2022. Yet another Amazon Prime Video masterpiece, strictly for adults, that dropped on the 4th of March 2022, is The Boys presents Diabolical. The show had 8 mini episodes, each 12 to 14 minutes long. It's short, sharp, and packed with a hell of a lot of punch. It's backed by the brains behind The Boys: Eric Kripke, Seth Rogen, Evan Goldberg, and more executive producers. Studios like Titmouse, Amazon Studios, Sony Pictures Television, and Point Grey Pictures brought it to life. This short animated series also has a wild lineup of writers and directors: Awkwafina, Andy Samberg, Justin Roiland, Aisha Tyler, and even Garth Ennis each have their own episode. Naturally, the episodes have their own vibe of animation as well. One looks like a Saturday morning cartoon parody, another feels like anime, and some leaned into straight-up gore or surreal humor. If you thought The Boys was edgy, this is a few steps ahead. You can expect violence, inappropriate language, and stuff that's emotionally intense. It's dark, cynical, and definitely not for kids. There are exploding bodies, grotesque mutations, babies with laser vision cutting people in half, and plenty of foul-mouthed characters who feel more real than heroic. One standout is John and Soon-hee, which isn't just violent, but genuinely tragic. It's about cancer, love, and how superpowers can't save you from everything. The different themes that the series played with are one of the major reasons that the series is meant for adults: corporate greed, broken families, identity, and even the emptiness of chasing power. The humor is crude, sure, but underneath, there's social commentary that mirrors the cynical DNA of The Boys. Even the voice cast screams adult animation. You've got Anthony Starr back as Homelander, along with Kumail Nanjiani, Don Cheadle, Michael Cera, Simon Pegg, and Elizabeth Shue. Stripperella, 2003. Only in the early 2000s could something like Stripperella actually make it to TV. This adult cartoon was created by none other than Stan Lee and starring Pamela Anderson as the voice of Erotica Jones. This short-lived animated series ran on Spike TV in 2003. What was the plot? As the title of the series suggests, by day, Erotica is a stripper. By night, she's a crime-fighting superhero called Stripperella. Yeah, it sounds like a joke, and honestly, most of it was. However, surprisingly, the show carved out a weird place in adult animation. This wasn't built for kids in any way. First off, it aired late at night on Spike TV, which was marketing itself as TV for men at the time. The show leaned heavily into adult humor, raunchy jokes, and plenty of sexual innuendo. It wasn't X-rated, but it pushed the line as far as basic cable would let it go. Beyond that, the villains and plots were deliberately absurd, so it was unlikely that any kid would be able to comprehend that. One villain was Dr. Caesarian, a plastic surgeon who wanted to make the entire world perfect through extreme cosmetic surgery. Another was Queen Clitoris, who hypnotized men with her pheromones. You also had villains like Small Fry, a tiny criminal mastermind, and Cheapo, a discount supervillain obsessed with cutting costs while committing crimes. The show never pretended to be serious. It was campy, it was trashy, but at the same time, it was self-aware. The production was handled by Spike TV and The Firm, with Nickelodeon Digital working on the animation, and of course, most people tuned in for Pamela Anderson. Oh, and by the way, Anderson actually had fun with the role, but it wasn't just the skimpy outfits or nudity jokes that made the series adult. Even though the series was never meant to be taken seriously, the way it satirized pop culture, media, and even superheroes themselves deserves appreciation. Underneath the raunchy exterior, the writing poked fun at corporate greed, vanity, and the way society objectifies women. Of course, it also leaned right into that objectification, which is why critics were split. The show only lasted one season, 13 episodes, before Spike TV pulled the plug. It's messy, it's dated, but it's also a perfect time capsule.
I am watching the stars. Halley's Comet tumbles through.
Watchmen, motion comic, 2008. Back in 2008, before Zack Snyder's Watchmen film hit theaters, HBO released something unusual. Watchmen, motion comic. It wasn't a traditional cartoon, and it wasn't a straight audiobook either. It was a hybrid. Basically, DC took Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons' iconic 12-issue comic series and brought it to life, but with minimal movements. The art was lifted directly from the original pages, with slight animation. The characters blinked, smoke curled, blood dripped, and there wasn't much animation beyond that. Plot-wise, the series doesn't change a thing. It's the full story of Watchmen, issue by issue. We start with the murder of Edward Blake, aka the Comedian, a government-sanctioned hero whose brutal death kicks off a conspiracy. From there, we dive into a world where superheroes aren't shining beacons of justice. They're retired, outlawed, or compromised by politics. The paranoid vigilante Rorschach digs into Blake's death and slowly unravels a massive scheme that involves global manipulation, moral compromise, and the blurred lines between savior and monster. Now, what makes this so clearly not for kids? Well, first, Watchmen was never written for kids in the first place. The story deals with nuclear anxiety, political corruption, sexual assault, and the uglier sides of human nature. The violence isn't sanitized either. It's bloody, harsh, and often uncomfortable to watch. Same with the sex and nudity. Even more unsettling are the themes: utilitarianism, the abuse of power, and whether mass manipulation can ever be justified if it means peace. That's heavy stuff, especially for a comic. The motion comic itself was produced by Warner Premiere and animated by Juice Films. It was released digitally in chapters before being bundled into a DVD and Blu-ray set. Interestingly, every character was voiced by a single narrator, Tom Steckschulte, which gave it this audiobook meets animation feel. Some fans loved the faithful adaptation, while others thought the single voice made it feel awkward. But love it or not, it stood out as one of the most direct translations of a graphic novel to screen ever attempted. Creature Commandos 2024. Alright, it's now time for our final pick. Creature Commandos is the first animated series in James Gunn's rebooted DC universe. It is unapologetically weird, wild, and yes, meant for grown-ups. What's it all about? Amanda Waller, tired of trading in human lives, puts together a new Black Ops squad made entirely of monsters. We're talking Task Force M, also known as the Creature Commandos. You've got Eric Frankenstein, a gruff, immortal monster soldier who can't quite die. Then there's his estranged partner, the Bride of Frankenstein, who's clever, pragmatic, and doesn't exactly see eye to eye with him. Dr. Phosphorus is a walking nuclear skeleton who literally burns with rage. while Nina Mazursky is a tragic amphibious scientist who experimented on herself and lost her humanity in the process. G.I. Robot brings old-school pulp energy, and yes, Weasel from Guns the Suicide Squad also makes the cut. Still gross, still unsettling. To lead them all, we have Rick Flag Sr. The first mission of this team was to protect Princess Ilana of Pakolistan from the Amazon sorceress Circe and her sons of Themyscira. Gunn wrote every episode, and Dean Lorey ran the show, while animation is by DC Studios and Warner Brothers. This show has no interest in being PG. There's gore, there's off-color humor, there's existential wounds, and emotional farewells. Episode 4, Chasing Squirrels, for example, is sad. It really hits you with backstory and heart, especially touching if you're into character-driven pain. At its core, Creature Commandos is about outcasts trying to find a place in a world that doesn't want them. A lot of people even compare it to Guardians of the Galaxy, except darker, grosser, and less polished. These are characters who wrestle with identity, trauma, and loneliness. They're monsters on the outside and inside, and the show doesn't sugarcoat it. Marvelous verdict. At the end of the day, these shows weren't just about capes and powers. They were about people, pain, and all the messy adult stuff that comes with living in a world where heroes aren't always heroic. They broke rules, pushed limits, and made it clear that animation can be just as brutal, emotional, and thought-provoking as anything on screen. Not everyone could handle them, and that's the point. They weren't built for everyone, definitely not for kids. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one, be safe, and thanks everyone.